Hello, everyone. It's nice to meet you. My name is James Carman from Beyond Being Human, and it's lovely that you could all join me tonight. You guys are so established in your field and so diverse. So this is going to be a great conversation. If you could please introduce yourself, just a brief introduction, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper. So Celestine Star.
So thank you. It's so good to be here, James. I am a celestial being. I'm an awakened celestial being. I understand my life has been here since thousands and thousands of years. This is my last walk, so I'm really happy to complete that. Raised in metaphysics, I was in one of the orders of the magic with a K community. So I was raised to understand the natural workings of the cosmos as since the time I could breathe, and to understand the inner dimensional fields. I studied esoteric science. I worked with our heritage, Egyptian heritage, as hermetics and alchemy, lots of the esoteric mysteries. So I carry with me a beautiful basket. I have the female mysteries with me. And as I grew and lived through different aspects of myself, I became a priestess in my own temple of light, but also took some time to become quite a yogini in the deep forest. And there I met the immortals. Again, my life with the ultra terrestrials, the higher intelligence, the God force has always been with me. That is the thread leading through the way. So I am here to assist in the elevation of consciousness on this planet, to keep the way sacred. And I just love you all. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much, Mike Clelland. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself? He's an accomplished writer.
Thank you. So James, you and I met probably 2008, I bet, and we've bumped into each other. Our paths have crossed over the years. And when you and I met, I was really fragile. It was a very new time for me. So that's now 13 years ago. And in those years, I was doubting my own experiences. That's gone. I don't doubt my experiences anymore. I've had enough and had enough confirmation type events that I'm no longer doubting that. So I've written 3 books on the subject partially on my own experiences, and then partially on owls and how owls, the big birds with the big eyes, how they show up in this lore, how they show up within not just UFO contact, but all like a whole long list of highly charged human events. So, and that, I just thought that was in the beginning of my journey, I guess, I had some powerful experiences with owls. So along the way, I've just asked the question to other people: have you ever had any odd experiences with owls? And I would never have guessed how inundated, how flooded I would be with these accounts. So I've been collecting, archiving, and trying to share these accounts as part of my own, my own mission statement, as it were. So we're not going to run out of stories if you ask to hear some owl stories. So.
And Adam, Apollo, how are you doing? Why don't you give us an introduction about yourself?
Sure, James. Thanks so much for having me here on this panel tonight with you guys. It's really a pleasure to be here. Unlike Celestine, I didn't have a very easy childhood. And my mom used to say I always knew when I needed a haircut, or she'd be thinking about something and I'd point out this thought that was in her mind. But I went a long time sort of devoid of my self-awareness and struggled a lot as a young teenager, middle school and high school, really struggling with the nature of truth and the nature of what it means to be a being and what's real. And I felt like my teachers in school were lying to me about a lot of the facts, so to speak, that they were giving me about our history, about philosophy, about science. And it took until I was about 15 and I had an awakening experience in which I became aware of my human energy body. And that reconnection to my human energy field was like finding a key to unlock a door to an Akashic library that I had set away for myself. And I suddenly was picked up and carried by this massive wave of experiences that led me to better understand the nature of what we are as conscious beings, our relationship to reality and what reality is. A lot of the work that I call the unified harmonic matrix, which is how the different layers of experience and consciousness interact physically with space-time and how we interoperate with this fabric of reality around us. And that kind of self-exploration led me to a lot of work in the edges of spaces like education, technology, and got me through sharing little bits of my experience and my work here and there and insights in different areas to be invited to be a young leadership speaker at the White House during the Obama administration. I was then invited to speak at the United Nations several times within the Nexus Youth Summits, and then at conferences and festivals around the world, going on my own journey of exploring who I am, who I have been across time, what I'm here to do and what I'm here to share, and really just revealing as much as I can, as much as I felt comfortable with at different points in my life, parts of these insights to try to help others who are on paths of awakening, who are on paths of self-discovery, to try to give some context and some language that we can use to find shared understanding and really better develop our global community of awakened people as stewards for this earth and for the future that we envision for our children for generations to come. So that's my short intro, and it's really such a pleasure to be here with all of you, and so happy to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. So I want to start off with the idea of being a lifer. And this is kind of like, you know, if you're involved in this field of the paranormal, like it's just, you know, you're kind of addicted to it and you ravenously read all these books, and then you say, no, I'm going to be a real person and get a real job and do all this stuff. And then it always comes back. It always draws you back. And then it's just like, at some point you just say, throw your hands up and say, okay, I'm in it. So Celestine, why don't you tell us about this? Kind of in which way do you consider yourself a lifer? What have you experienced that's kind of brought you in this kind of whole trajectory through your life?
That's a very good question. And a lifer, to when I hear you speak, not only for the UFO community, but for other intelligences. So I think I started out very young in being introduced to the spirit world. And so it wasn't anything new to me that there were other beings. I have some Native American, some Egyptian, and of course, our people come from the stars. So you're always in relationship to the intelligence in creation. I'm going to give an example of a time in 1960. I was 7 years old. And what I didn't realize was that our government, you know, the Navy was blowing up nuclear weapons, atomic weapons in the atmosphere. That had always been a question. So I want to thank you, James, for bringing that to me. But what had happened was one day there was a huge shift in the atmosphere. It was like an explosion. I lived in Alamogordo, New Mexico with my parents, and everybody looked into the sky, and suddenly the sky was torn in two. Literally, there was a delineating line. It was kind of warbly, and then it was black. And then on the other side was the sun and the clouds. It was a normal sky. And it stayed this way for weeks. What everybody knew was that the sky had been torn in two. What we didn't know is how it was done. So that you really bring clarity. We knew that they were doing atomic bomb blasting. And so what it did was, you know, the Native Americans started doing the ghost dance again. So I would go to powwow, but eventually you would see these huge silver discs uh, floating into the landscape and across the landscape at a very slow pace and taking their time. If you're on the freeways, all the Studebakers and the Fords would all stop. Everybody would get out, and there would be enough time to really just watch them gracefully go across the landscape. And this was happening on a constant basis. Nobody knew without, oh, that just, the parents are saying belongs to the government. This is some kind of program. What we didn't know was that they were actually trying to figure out what we were doing to our planet. And it was really the beginning of the flying saucer type things going on, where we could just see them out in the open. My stepfather decided to follow one night, one day, afternoon. It was afternoon, but it was kind of dusk by the time he had driven several miles. I don't know how many miles. It was very long ways. We kept asking, where are you going? We didn't realize he was following the saucer. And as he got to the end, the saucer landed. We were hundreds of yards away, and suddenly everyone, my mother, my brother, and myself, my stepfather, were in the ship. We were in an examination room. So my relationship with other intelligences, spirits, forms, including elementals or spirit guides, allowed me to be calm and observant. And so we were all being examined. We were laying on tables being examined. And the tall grays with the three fingers, I think it was three or four. But the one that was looking at me with the big almond eyes was, really speaking to me telepathically and telling me that they were just concerned because we were feeding our children chemicals, DDT, I recognize that, opiates in our cough syrup, and cocaine we were drinking, so we were not really balanced in our nutritional awareness. And so they were becoming observant. So I feel like a lot of the abductions, some of them were self-approved so that they could figure out what we were doing that would lead us to actually ripping a hole in our planet. But yes, as an experience, a lifer, it's just been so natural for me. It hasn't been something that I seek out and I'm running after. It kind of comes to me. I was called to the mountains. Next thing I know, my energy through purification, and this is where they live, they began to show themselves to me, and I met the High Spiritual Council and the Galactic Star Federation. So it's continued like that. I do have science background. I worked as a neurosensory developer doing laser technologies in the eyes with Dr. Downing for many, many years. So there's a bit of a science with me as well as spirituality. And I think they like that, they're attracted. I am attracted to them for their science, their technologies, and how they show me the future for humanity. I'm excited about that. So as a lifer, it is. Each one of us are galactic beings in a biological unit. And as we awaken, so that's really where the breadcrumbs lead to. They lead you back to who you are. Thank you.
So, Michael, what about you? Tell us about kind of how you want to frame this, because I would consider you a lifer. How are you working with this?
Well, I mean, I said it earlier that early on, like a decade ago, it was rough. Like it was a rough time for me. So I have been very public about my coming forward with my own experiences and my research. And my research and my own experiences are completely intertwined. Like I'm doing this research for totally subjective reasons. Like I want the answers. I'm like searching for the answers. I'm looking for my own path in this. And that's been like, people have resonated really well with that, right? So I'm coming at it from a place where I'm struggling with this mystery and then trying to make sense of it. So as a boy, I had missing time events. I had close-up UFO sightings. I had some psychic events as a boy. And then in my 30s, I had an experience where I saw 5 gray beings in my yard. And I woke up from a sound sleep, saw this out the window. And then a voice in my head said, now is the time to put your head on the pillow and shut down. And I saw this creepiest, scariest thing imaginable, and I felt no emotion at all. And I just went right back to sleep. And the next day I didn't even bother to go and see if there were footprints in the snow out my window. But in the intervening years, that event, that night has had so many synchronicities tied into it. So I'm kind of, I don't fit nicely into the research community as far as what I'm doing and what I'm trying to do, partially because it's so much my own story. Like I think some folks are a little taken aback that I can't be objective, and I can't. I simply can't be objective because it's my own story that I'm trying to untangle, and so in along the way, I have and this is the core of my research has been this owl stuff. So I'm looking at this thin little narrow band. There's this huge wide spectrum that is the paranormal, that's UFO and stuff like that. But I'm looking at this little band, this thin little slice of this giant pie. And what I found is, and that little thin slice is the owl stuff, people having owl sightings. And what I found is that thinnest little slice is so rich and so rewarding and so like heartening as far as the amount of powerful, beautiful stories. And I mean, so I can't sum up my research quickly, but I can certainly say a few things. One of the things that happens within this little narrow band is the people who have an owl and UFO experience. And more lately, I've been less tied into the UFO thing and more just focused on people who have owl experiences. And I say that they're connected to highly charged human experiences. In a UFO sighting or UFO contact would certainly qualify for highly charged UFO or highly charged human experience. But within that little narrow band, people say, like I saw this UFO, and then there was this owl, and it just so connected. And I got a lot of stories where, someone sees an owl, and the next thing they know, they look in the sky and they see a flying saucer. And then they'll mostly say something like, oh, and then the owl and UFO. Then I had a spiritual awakening. So that's just interwoven into the fabric of the research that I've been doing. So as far as me being a lifer, like I am selfish, like I am needy, like I want my own answers. I don't have a whole lot of answers. I've become much more at peace now that I made a conscious decision, like I'm never going to truly find the answer that's going to satisfy everyone, probably not even satisfy me. So that I'm content with the mystery and the questions and I'm also fascinated by the accounts and fascinated by the stories. I've got thousands of them, and I just revel in every single one. There's such a power to them. These synchronistic, paranormal, mystical owl experiences.
Thank you. It reminds me of the great shaman Rolling Thunder. There was a time when this man was dying, and it was very grave, and he was doing everything he could to save him. And there was an owl in a tree, and it was barking at him. And he was barking at the owl, and he was saying, no, this man is going to live. This man is going to survive. And he was having an argument with the owl, and he was insisting. And through his power of will, he enabled this man to survive. And it was kind of a tug of war with this owl. Amazing. So, Adam, how you kind of frame being a lifer. A lot of us, we're aware of past lives, or we're starting to integrate them. So that's kind of also a part of what it means to be a lifer.
To be honest, I'm not really familiar with this term lifer, but I'll speak to it from what I gather the meaning is around, which is that these are experiences we've had for life. Is that?
I'm kind of like twisting the term, because a lifer is someone's in jail for life, but I don't want to use.
I see.
Framing. I want to use like we're lifers because we're so drawn to it. We can't pull back. We don't live in consensus reality anymore because we can't. Right?
Yeah, it's just no going back. That's true. Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for that little bit of context. And I was like, wow, am I the only person that's not using this term these days? So, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely a lifer when it comes to the exploration of my own eternal life and my own being across time, and certainly my connection with other kinds of beings in other worlds. And part of that for me is that Since I was about 18, which was a couple of years after I woke up, although I had a couple fragments of experiences before that, right around the time I was 18, things got very, very intense in terms of my life, giving me moments where I had simultaneous flashbacks to other times with people around me. And these occurrences were, at first, I had no logical framework to understand them. I didn't know how to process them, how to translate them, how to tell anybody about them. And my friends that I was having the experiences with were even further from being able to integrate it than I was. And, then there were a few things that happened where, for example, a gentleman that I had literally just met gets super drunk at a Halloween party and starts calling me by the name that I was remembering from this other lifetime with this woman that I was with in that lifetime, and her by that name. And he's bawling, crying, apologizing to me for the crimes that he committed against me and my family in that lifetime. And I could feel it. I knew it. It was like I could feel the daggers. I could feel the depth of the pain, and I could feel where he'd stabbed me with a sword when we killed each other. It was so visceral, so deeply emotional, and so present that juncture taught me that I couldn't ignore this anymore. And I needed to actually study it with the full power of my awareness, and bring my attention to it. And I took on a method that is sometimes referred to as a transpersonal psychological study, where you simply detach enough from your own experience to witness and record the data of what you're seeing, what you're experiencing, and witness and record the data of what other people are seeing and experiencing, and start kind of charting the data and taking a look at just what's there. What are the dreams that this person is having? What are the memories this person is having? What are these direct experiences you're having? And from that, I started to architect this map, and see that not only were the experiences I was having validated by the experiences of others, but that I was starting to actually be able to place them in time, in historical context, with references to actually specific other people. And then eventually even to discovering my name, the year I was born, in one of my lifetimes, and able to actually look up myself on Wikipedia, which was a really, really trippy experience, let me tell you. And see the lands and see the pictures of the places that I cared for. And fortunately, that lifetime was only a few hundred years ago, 1600. So it wasn't that long ago. So there was fairly good historical records. But pulling the thread, kind of like doing this for life, discovering who I am, eventually led to my discoveries that I was not from this planet. And that juncture was one of the most profound breaks in my life, sort of breakthroughs and breaks, because it was a realization that, my gosh, the extraterrestrial thing, the UFOs, the science of biospheric population and the galaxy that I'd always been interested in, all of it was intellectual, but something changed drastically when it became personal. And suddenly I realized that there's no such thing as an alien. An alien is just something that you don't understand, and you call an alien because you're afraid of understanding it. You're not willing to get to know it. But there are other beings out there, and those other beings may not even be that different from us. And in fact, many of us may be from other worlds. And so those beings are our own species. They are our own family from long ago. And gaining even the smallest glimpse at that truth changes the context of everything that we're dealing with now and everything we're facing going into the future. Because it means that getting to know how we go forward as stewards of our planet requires us to know what it means to have been a species that has taken stewardship of its planet and traveled to other worlds and become other species. And that our challenges are not isolated to human karmas and dramas, but are part of galactic epics that have traversed the galaxy. And these seemingly aggrandized stories become so very real and present and transformative when they are your experience in your own heart, when they are your connection with another being, that true meeting of souls that can happen. And I believe that it's one of the most beautiful experiences that we can have as beings, is to get to know who we are and to discover who our star family is, which is why I've become so committed to continuing focusing on that work, even as a scientist, even as a technologist, needing to help people build a bridge to make those kinds of experiences possible.
I would like to talk a little bit about shamanic initiation in terms of kind of these phenomenal worlds. With shamanic initiation, oftentimes it comes about with a sickness or with a tragedy, and either the student can overcome the illness or overcome the tragedy and kind of raise to a higher level and become a spiritual initiate, or they die. So let's talk about this kind of idea in relation to this phenomena. So Celestine, would you care to?
I want to take a moment with that, because shamanic initiation to me is a gateway. And all of us have these experiences. I listened to Mike talk about his experiences, and you, Evan, and with deep appreciation. What happens when you were a teenager, Adam? That was a shamanic experience to me, and it changes your life forever. For myself, being among magical people with a K, magic with a K was always about the demands and the control, and it was kind of reverse consciousness for me. I was always outsider looking in, it wasn't easy for me. It was only until I made a determination that I would let them teach me everything that I could learn so that I could help others. And in my Native American, I learned from a shaman. She taught me the way of the medicine wheel, so I would understand my universe and moving forward. But my death experience, I had a death experience at the age of 6, went to the light, the reading of the life, and entered the Godhead. That, for me, was my shamanic initiation. It can never be taken away. It is with me, and I carry it, and I offer it as medicine to people to understand. I mean, I have no doubt of other intelligence that exists beyond this human earth and animals and trees, but everything is alive to me. And I think it's important, these little milestones that we have in our life, whether it's the 5 ETs or beings who are standing in your backyard, Mike, that was your shamanic initiation. And it's a thread that you carry with you. And eventually, as you awaken to different intelligences about yourself and different understandings, it's like connecting the dots, and you go, perhaps I sent them ahead in time to come and wake me up so that I would be on this path of awakening. These shamanic initiations, and as a shaman, I spent a lot of time working with people in the deep forest, 980 acres. Took a lot of people in to do vision quest. What I would say is people would come without even an awareness of the totality of their beings. For me, I see everyone as divine, and I'm looking for, not for a superpower, but just to hold space for them to open up themselves and to experience what they need. I spent a lot of time with men in the forest. They would open up their heart chakra and they could feel love for the first time. And that was really amazing thing. I mean, they literally, this is so painful for me. But the heart was cracking open. And when they got it, they got it. There's a lot of people who have been suffering in their lifetime. I mean, my childhood was filled with a lot of pain and sorrow and suffering, but I transformed it. And so then in knowing that, when I opened the Temple of Light, I utilized my wisdom to help others to transform that. And these small awakenings in polishing our mirror, we would say, and looking at the shadow side, looking at the depths of the pain, looking at the depths of the sorrow, and having somebody who could hold the container or perhaps guide you through the maze of the mind. It takes the wisdom of the spirit to guide somebody through their mind back into the place where they were children, or what was happening in the complex of the family that caused you to feel like you were not worthy. What was happening when you felt unloved, and how did that trauma become the thread through your whole life? Looking at your birth contracts, looking at soul families. Soul families go from lifetime to lifetime, experiencing particular things. There was a professor who studied the Civil War, or there was the early American Civil War, and he realized in this one town that as he was doing past life regressions, that some people were soldiers and some were Indians, but also they switched sides, you know. But they were the same people, but they had spent many lifetimes. Sometimes they were soldiers, sometimes Indians, sometimes, you know, Confederate or whatever. And he wrote a whole book on it. It was like, when I read that, I go, that was it. So for me, the shamans hold the gateway. And as the extraterrestrials have told me, my ultra-terrestrial brothers and sisters, there has always been a gateway for you. If you're ready to go home, the gateway is open. Teachers, shamans, they hold the gateway for you to enter, but letting go, it's almost like you have the polishing of the mirror is resolving the issues. So not going through that little eye of the needle as you move closer to the awakening of the total divine self. There is a level of necessity to polish the trauma, to let go of the blocks, to let go of those things that are no longer needed. And as you do, and I would always circle the person back around to their birth, and they recognize that they're a divine being entering into that particular family, that purpose, that suffering. What did you master? Okay, was that an agreement or a mission? So the initiation takes you to a place where you can understand the lower nature of humanity, the lower nature of yourself, the lower nature, so that you can then decide, is it time to let it go? I spend a lot of time now taking people to the first time they came to Earth. That has been an incredible experience. And as they awaken to why they came, and then you take them back to where they came from, they come face to face with their divinity. So that's an initiation in itself. I think initiations take us from one milestone to the other. It has for myself, and I love it. You know, I welcome any shamanic initiation. I think they're good for our souls, and they carry us to the next place.
Thank you, Celestine. So, Mike, why don't you address this? Maybe you can tell us a story, either one from one of your own. I know that you told me a story about you camping in Utah.
Okay, sure. So I have a quick story. This is about so anyway, with owl stuff, the shamanic thing is all over the owl lore. I've talked to a lot of shamans and a lot of people who have shamanic practices in their tradition, and the owl is well understood as far as being a totem for the shamanic initiation. Given that, would UFO contact be a form of shamanic initiation? You know, I can explore those questions. So a guy sends me a letter. This doesn't have a UFO in it, but it has everything about the power of the owl sort of embedded in it. And we talk, and he says, I was a boy, and I grew up on an Indian reservation. He was Native American, and he had a kite, and he was flying his kite, and he loved this kite as a 12-year-old boy, and the kite got caught up, and it got dragged off in the wind. So the ball of string and everything got taken off, and he could watch the kite, and it went into this forest. And then he got a friend and he said, this is my kite. I want to find this kite. So they walked around the forest and walked around, and they saw it at the top of a tree, the kite. And they went to the tree, and at the bottom of the tree was an owl, a big owl, and it had been all wrapped up in the kite string. And the owl would have died if they hadn't looked for the kite. So they got an adult, and they came back and they cut the owl free, and the owl was injured because of this. And they nursed the owl back to health, and they eventually let it go. When he told me the story, without skipping a beat really, and I said, "Are you a shaman?" And he said, "Oh man, yeah, in a word, yes." So he told a story that I recognized immediately as like a childhood marker, or I don't know if initiation is the right word, but it's the kind of story that has to be explored and has to be processed, as an archetypal image. The owl as an archetype, it holds some deeper power. Like on the surface, right? That's a weird little story. It doesn't really mean much. Kid loses his kite and tangles up in an owl, and but at a deeper level, for me anyway, like I resonate with the sort of the storytelling power of that, the mythic quality of that. So those are the kinds of stories that I'm finding. These stories are painted with this mythic quality, these owl stories often. And that's one of the things I do. I feel like I say this all the time. I have to, when I have to take off my UFO investigator hat when trying to do this research and push that aside. And then I have to pick up my shaman hat and put my shaman hat on and ask the questions that a shaman would ask of people who just even seeing a UFO, I'll ask, or seeing an owl, I'll ask those same questions.
Mike, can you tell the story about the guy who was driving and saw the owl and then he saw the UFO?
So he's got a friend of mine, his name is Mike. And I met him at a UFO conference. Actually, when I was at the conference, I stood on stage and I gave a presentation. And then part of the presentation was this had to do with one of the stories, but I got the recorded sound of a eastern screech owl and him, this funny whinny. It sounds like a tiny horse, sounds like a little baby horse. It makes this funny noise. And he came up to me after the thing and he said, I've heard that noise. That noise you played, I almost fell out of my chair. That came out of my little boy's room. It came out of his baby monitor in my child's room, and that was like a really powerful, almost unsettling thing to hear. So anyway, he gets back to me later and he says, "Yeah, I'm driving home from work, and I get it was middle of the day, and I'm across the bridge. It's the same route I take home every night. And just as I cross the bridge, this owl flies right up against the windshield and like jams on the brake. It scares the crap out of him. And he's like totally emotional, like, whoa, like, how did that happen in the full daylight?" So he makes a turn and he goes about a half mile. And then he looks over and there's a giant copper colored flying saucer hovering above this like ugly industrial park right along the edge of the highway. And he's kind of caught in traffic. So he's kind of trying to look at this thing, and then it raises up and kind of goes into the clouds as he's moves on in traffic. And he says, "Oh yeah, by the way, I was listening to you give a talk about owls and UFOs. I was listening to it on my MP3 player in my car." And I was like, What? You were listening to my voice talking about owls and UFOs, and you saw an owl and UFO at the same time? He's like, "Yeah." Now, that's a particularly powerful example of that, but I have so many examples of people either seeing an owl while reading a book, one of my books, or hearing me talk or a podcast, or out seeing a UFO while reading one of my books or doing a podcast. It is so intertwined. It tells me quite clearly that I am intertwined with this, and I cannot pretend that I'm not. That story has been told and retold to me so many times that I have to trust the power of it.
Thank you so much. Adam, how do you relate to this phenomena in kind of like the idea of it being a shamanic initiation of some sort?
Yeah, thank you for the beautiful stories, Mike. And it's definitely, I think, one of the fascinating challenges for people waking up and going through big transformational processes is coming to terms with the fact that all the things that are happening are connected to them, and that they're at the center of the wheel of time of their own experience, so to speak. And I've seen it go real wrong too, where like Messiah complex goes off the deep end. I've had close friends that I love dearly tell me that they believe that they are to be the emperor of the new world, and while treating everybody around them like crap. It's challenging to see that, and I look at that portion of development, and I can see that space of our spiritual development as one of kind of the critical junctures where we realize our divinity. We come into awareness that everything that happens is connected to us. We see the patterns of our own will expressed in the myriad mirrors around us. We find patterns constantly teaching us and reminding us and showing us deeper ways into the path. And some people slip into a trap of the great question of, oh my God, does this mean that like I'm Jesus and I'm the savior of the world, or that I'm the one who must now be the like person who's going to save everybody? It happens. And I know it because I had the opportunity in my own life to have many of these very powerful, to use the word shamanic, junctures. I respect traditional wisdom teachings of different cultures from around the world. And so, of course, I have to acknowledge the word shamanic, and shaman comes from the Siberian tribes and the traditions of deep Asia. And there are particular meanings in the ways they hold that word. And it's one that we can share as a culture to better understand what it means to come up against a process of spiritual transformation that's so deep that some part of us dies and a new part of us is born in the process. And that is a deeply woven piece of the medicine work, whether you're talking about the ayahuasqueros, or the Iboga tribes in Africa, or the shamanic medicine tribes in Asia, or the Druids and Tuatha De Danann tribes in the Nordic peoples, and the use of the muscaria mushroom and other kinds of mushrooms. And so it's something that we must face, is this sort of recognition of the truth of who we are. And that means certain things die. And there's also a level of embodying the truth of who we are that requires letting certain facets of our ego and the things that we hold on to die. So it's really a story about death. And, I have had a few really powerful experiences of death in my life. When I was very young, I came back from India from a spiritual retreat center that I had no idea what was going on at, but was for this, avatar Meher Baba, this guy Mirwan Shariar Irani. I was like 10 years old, and I arrived home to discovering that my stepmother had just died in a car accident. My stepbrother, who was 18, had been driving the car and had just returned from Italy with his fiancée, meeting her whole family. And he fell asleep at the wheel, crossed the meridian, hit another car head on, killed a family of 4, killed his mom and killed his fiancée, and ended up in the hospital with critical injuries. And that was the first real entrance to a shamanic journey that I'd ever faced. And I was 10 years old. I had no idea what was going on, but I felt like I just entered a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. And I couldn't go to sleep. And I would sleep for only a couple hours a night, usually. And I didn't want to make friends. I didn't know what to feel. I didn't know how to support the grief my father had. I didn't know how to deal with the craziness that my stepbrothers were going through. And it required some part of me that was the child at that time to die. I had to release and let go of some part of my childhood to step into who I would become. And that was a being that has dealt with tragedy, has dealt with trauma, has dealt with great pain. And, inherent to a lot of these stories, and I heard you talking about this, Celestine, for everyone, there is, in that death process, in that crossing process, it often involves acceptance of great pain, acceptance of great shadow, of great trauma. And I think that we're given the gift every cycle in our lives, every year of our lives, every month of our lives, potentially, to face new layers of who we are. And that means accepting traumas we haven't yet accepted yet, facing shadows we haven't yet looked at. And now, right now, this time, the Yuletide time, the dark time of the year here in the Northern Hemisphere, is a really powerful time to do the work of acceptance. And that means, putting in the fire the things that you need to let go of and the feelings and the weight that you're carrying. It means really embracing the parts of yourself that are still scared, that are still troubled, that are still reacting to certain situations out of a reaction to trauma that you had a long time ago. And we have this beautiful space in the context of holidays and love and family coming together to actually look at these old patterns, look at the ways that we're no longer willing to live, and actively, shamanically engage the energy of those experiences. Embrace the discomfort that you're still feeling with that family member, pull in and really feel the part of you that's hurt, that hasn't said the thing that needs to be said, and actually breathe through it and feel it and integrate it, because taking that in is like taking medicine that's going to transform you and transform part of your life.
So I want to talk now about the idea of dimensionality. And it's, there's so many aspects of dimensionality in this topic. But in terms of someone who is a lifer and has experienced all different kinds of phenomena, in a way, we start expanding the perimeter of what we can perceive and what we perceive in who we interact with on a daily or regular basis. So we kind of open up windows to more and deeper dimensionality that becomes everyday life. So Celestine, what do you got for me there?
Oh, I have such goodies. So as a celestial being, my daily life is to be in relationship with all my relations, whether they have reverse consciousness, whether they are the Holy of Holies, my star kin. I could walk out of my house and they will be there to welcome me. I still try to figure out, how do they know that? They will follow me in my car. They have their ships. We travel together. My relationship with my community and the place where I live. The nation is difficult now. There's challenges with the nation, but I try to hold space for my relations, not only in this nation, but in the world. As I see that, the evolution of consciousness is connected to what you were talking about, that dimensional expansion. And my vision and my knowing is that humanity is going through that process of looking at all the underbelly, all the lower nature that we, how we hold our children, how we develop our families. Some of these methods are broken. They cannot be used in this moving forward in our consciousness. As our consciousness becomes elevated in awareness, what I'm seeing is that we're going from national to global to cosmic. So I'm here to help midwife beings who are having that cosmic consciousness to help us to make that leap. And I've been told that there's a chasm. We're going over the chasm in evolution of consciousness. And just imagine that we are turning the wheel. The wheel has already turned. And I see the awakening that we are one humanity. Long ago, probably 20 years ago, I recognized that until we understand that, the ultra-terrestrials, they look at us and they're like, well, they're really not as advanced as they think they are. And I have to say, excuse me, but you are correct. You see, for as long as one child does not have a home, as long as they're homeless, one homeless person, and this is what this is all about, that we are here gathered, then we are not elevated. We are not highly evolved beings. So with patients, they speak to me, they talk to me, they talk to those who have awakened to the higher consciousness and can have these conversations. So my heart is open to the awakening, and we going through the underbelly to rise up. It's the alchemical process of, in that place of fermentation where all the gunk and the gook, but we look at it and we recognize we don't need it anymore. And we have these brilliant young people stepping up to say, look, I have this new method. And that's where I put my focus. I put my focus on those who need help, who say, I want to move forward. I have this idea. Yes, give it to us. How can we support you? But it is to help all on earth, to help the all in the cosmos. So what I know is that we are taking in more energy from the cosmos. The Schumann resonance, if you want to be scientific about it, has risen from 7.83 to maybe around 300. So anybody thinking we're in the third dimension, we have left that many years ago, probably about 5 or 6 years ago. And so what I could say people are experiencing in their body and their consciousness is the coming together of the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere, the rational of the left and the spiritual of the right, and it's coming into balance and it's awakening. So people are getting more psychic, more clairvoyant, clairaudient, telepathic. And so the practitioners are stepping up to say, how can I help you? So if you're having experiences like that, do allow yourself to be guided towards those who have been on the path, because they could take you to where you need to go, or they could show you a person who can help you, hopefully not charlatans, but there it is. So for me, my relationship with creation is with the high spiritual council. Those that their intelligence is multi-universal, multi-dimensional, multi-galactic, different galaxies. They can come in as a form, and they can come in as light, or they could come in as sound. They could, so I don't want to keep going, but I do want to close it with we're in a dimension now that we are becoming galactic. So hold on to your seats. It's going to be a joyous ride.
Wonderful. So, Mike, can you tell us a story relating to this?
So dimensionality, that's kind of a big open-ended thing. And so I've been talking about in my work, owls, UFOs, and synchronicity. And that has been a bottomless pit. Those three things, each of those things has a power and in a way they weave together. And someone asked me in an interview, they said, how has your life changed since this has intersected your life, since you've been doing this research? And I thought for a moment, and I said, I now live in a magical universe. And I think that's true. I did a hypnosis session in 2018, and it was just to explore straight UFO type stuff. And some wild stuff came up. It's way too long to tell here, but I told the hypnotherapist, Yvonne Smith, I said, hey, at the end of this thing, I'd gotten published a couple of books already at this point and had been just immersed in owl stuff. And I said, at the end of this thing, I'll be in this kind of vulnerable, hypnotic trance. Just ask me, what's up with the owls? She goes, okay. We do the session at the end. I go through all the stuff. I cry. All the stuff is kind of shows up that it's hard to trust a lot of the stuff that came up, but wow. So at the end, I'm like, it's winding down. And she goes, and Mike, what is your connection to owls? And without skipping a beat, I go, the owls aren't important. And I never would have said that. Owls had been my whole life. I get up in the morning, I just owls. That's all I do all day is write about owls and research owls. And, so I was like, she asked me, what's your connection to owls? And I say, the owls aren't important. And it's a short little thing, and it is seared into my mind. The owls are a symbol on a door. The owl is the correct symbol for the door. But the owls aren't important. It is the door that is important. We are on this side of the door in a tight, claustrophobic little hallway. And on the other side of the door is an infinite vastness. And then I started talking in my own voice again. And I actually asked her afterwards, like, was I channeling? Because like, it's like, was I channeling? Because that's what it felt like. It felt like that wasn't for me. And she says, well, there's no way to know. But so for me, that's been a sort of mission statement that to back off from the owls and to focus on, the underlying deeper power of what the owl is symbolic of. And I would say that it's symbolic of a grander, deeper reality.
Yeah, there's that story where, the person, he comes to the church and he's sleeping in front of the church and he's waiting for the church doors to open and they never open. And then he realizes after an eternity, all he has to do is stand up and open the door and walk through, right? So that's a lot of us in our lives, right? We just have to, or Rilke wrote a beautiful poem about it. He says, it's called Church in the East, and it's about how in the middle of dinner, this man stands up and he leaves his children, he leaves the dishes, and he goes walking to discover a church in the East. And it says that he has to do that, otherwise his children would have to do that for him. So maybe that's kind of what we're up to. Adam, why don't you wrap this up into dimensionality, but also maybe give a little bit of a hint of something that's beautiful for the future, and leave us with a nice solstice, beyond being human Christmas feeling.
Sure. I'll do my best to bring some comfort and joy to all of your hearts.
Well, you don't have to, but it's
Yeah, no, I'm all about it. I'm not joking.
Okay.
So yeah, like, first of all, dimensionality, one of my favorite topics. It's just such a good one. When I was in high school, after I'd had this waking up experience, I was trying to kind of put all the pieces together. And over the last couple of years in high school, leading to my senior project, I decided for my senior project to basically do a project that would integrate as much of what I discovered as I could. And I called it the unification of science and spirituality through unified field theoretics. This was the title of my high school senior thesis thing, project, whatever. And what happened to enable me to put together the pieces was realizing that all of the parts of this puzzle of my experience and these visions that I'd had and these God realization experiences and the experiences of elementals and sacred geometry and this sort of vast array of discoveries in theoretical physics, from loop quantum gravity to string theory to Einstein's work to the metaphysics of different cultures, all fit perfectly into place when the map of how it fits together is our living consciousness vehicle. In other words, by understanding our energy bodies, our chakras, our wheels of experience, and our interfaces with reality within the context of the geometries of those interfaces, the routing systems of energy inside of our body, etc., all of the pieces of the puzzle of the universe already fit, because our bodies are literally a holographic fractal map of the universe itself. And so I came into a much deeper understanding of dimensionality because I understood resonance across planes, dimensions, and scales. So like a bell, when a bell is ringing, a bell has low frequency resonance, mid frequency resonance, high frequency resonances. And when you're listening to that bell, those jingle bells ringing, you can hear different frequencies depending on where your attention is and where your focus is. And this is also interestingly true of the Earth and the Schumann resonance, because the Schumann resonance of the Earth is actually based on the size of the Earth. It's actually the structural mechanics of the Earth And the Earth's resonance as an electromagnetic object operates like a bell. And so when we are paying attention to the Schumann resonance and spikes in the resonance and things like that, it's not that the 7.8 or the lower frequencies do not like go away and that it goes up to just higher frequencies and stays there. It's actually that the entire bell is resonating more or less at higher and lower frequencies at the same time. And we're noting that there's higher frequency resonances that we're picking up, meaning that our consciousness, to an extent, our relationship with the bell that is the Earth, is allowing our focus to experience a wider band of frequency. You know, you can imagine that for cats and dogs, they see different things in different colors. And we as humans see a little bit wider band of color frequencies. So we can discern a little differently. And when we begin to open up our higher sensory perception, we begin to become aware of an even wider band of information beyond the visible light that we see. We begin to notice quantum vacuum fluctuations or chi, ki, prana, etc., emanating off of people, off of trees, off of objects. We begin to notice that some of the subtleties of close friends passing information to each other or moving in concert with each other is not because of physical communication cues. It's because of telepathic communication. We begin to realize that a mother being aware that their child just hurt themselves outside is not just instinct or something in their blood telling them that their kid got hurt outside, but is actually entanglement and a psychic connection between that mother and that child. And that we can entangle with things all over the place wherever we put our attention. And that enables information transmission. And why speak to these abilities and these things that are sort of inherent and nested in our human capacity? Well, because our ability to create technology to change the world is directly in reflection to what we know we are capable of on the inside. Computers are just an externalization of one of our own internal technologies, which is the capacity for information storage, visualization, rendering, visualizing, etc. Now, what happens when you externalize the ability to do telepathy? You get a cell phone and you're able to call somebody on the other side of the planet and talk to them instantaneously. What happens when you externalize the fact that you are an infinite energy generator and that, in fact, space-time is full of energy? You get free energy systems that unlock our capacity to generate energy and abundance around the world. What happens when you externalize our capacity for astral travel and remote viewing? Well, then you get the keys to superluminal travel and the ability to pilot starships faster than light, because you can't use radar anymore when you're trying to jump to a star system that's 10, 20 light years away. You're not going to get the signal back in time. So you have to use the capacities of consciousness. And so inherent to these contact experiences, this communion with galactic family, this growth, this shamanic transformations happening on the planet, what we can see is that we are in this really, really powerful juncture as sort of teenagers in the galactic community getting ready to earn our driver's license. And that means showing that we can be responsible enough to get it behind the wheel of a car or the superluminal ship. It means showing that we're willing to take those next steps of growth and stewardship for our planet and for each other and for the many cultures, races, and ways of being on this world to become one people together. And I believe that this, holiday season is one of the greatest times where we can really feel that, because it doesn't matter whether you're Jewish or you're Christian or you're part of a Nordic tradition or Nordic tribe or you're, East Asian tradition or Indonesian or whatever it is. It's about understanding love and appreciation and the gifts that people give us, giving gratitude to them, expressing our love, and seeing the potential, the hope, the gift in all of our hearts that we can become one people of planet Earth, and that we can steward this planet into becoming a galactic civilization, and that all the keys we need to do that are already inside of us. And they come out every time we share our love.
there's a lot of talk about connecting to the galactic goodness in the universe and stuff like that. I just feel, for me personally, like I feel much more connected to the earth, to the ground, to our planet. I feel really connected. So I would say in this time of year, and especially with the shorter days and the longer nights and things like that, with the longer nights, we get the beautiful night sky. So at the same time you're looking up at the stars, just make sure that you recognize that you are connected, deeply connected. You are part of this earth, and with that comes responsibilities, and also take advantage, the joy of it. So it's a beautiful planet we live on.
And Celestine, why don't you give us your vision of how we can imagine the future better, and how we can kind of bring that into the new year?
Wow, that's a big imaginings. I think, first of all, really to understand that each of us counts. We're also important, that each of us have a purpose and a function for being here, an expression of the creation. And in understanding yourself as that, an expression, and knowing your purpose and function, and using that, you can utilize that to bring forth goodness for the earth and for the whole of creation. I think the envisioning is really coming from that place of deep love, truth, compassion, balance, harmony. Envisioning what you would feel would make a better world, but to know that it is so. For when you know it in your heart, when you see it and you say, thank you, I'm so grateful for manifesting that, knowing that it's already manifested, then you help us to bring it into realization. The heart is like the projector screen, and it helps us to manifest. The emotions help to manifest. But envisioning homelessness to be resolved, envisioning the leaders to step forward. If you are not helping humanity, step down and let those who can bring new envisioning, new innovations, new technologies, the expansion of our consciousness manifesting outward, as Adam was speaking about, that would help the whole of creation and the whole of the earth. So envisioning new leaders, we have a new level of young people coming forward. So envisioning those who can help to guide them in stepping forward and stepping up as they take over this earth for us, because soon they're going to be the ones that, bringing forth the anti-gravity machines and different things that will innovate this world and make it futuristic in a sense. And so really envisioning that no harm done to another. And you know what to do. You know what it is. You know how to make it good. From my heart to yours, have a happy holiday. My vision for the earth is greatness, to remember who we are, to come together as one humanity so that we can begin to really take advantage of each other's brilliance and knowledge and wisdom and create an earth that can be shining and be proud into the universe. We are one tone in the Milky Way. We are the children of the Milky Way, and I'm so honored to be on this earth with all of you.
Mike, Celestine, and Adam, thank you so much for joining me this evening. It's been wonderful. It's been very rich. My name is James Carman from Beyond Being Human, and we'll meet up again on the byways. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
It's been nice meeting both of you too.
Nice to meet you as well.
Good to see you, Celestine, as
So
always.
good to see you, Adam. I love you everything.